Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Olav Syversen, and I'm Vice President for Public and Political Affairs Europe at Equinor. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's virtual conference titled Unlocking the Benefits of Diversity in the Workplace. This event is the second of a series of events Equinor is organizing with Euractiv, and that we call Energize Your Day. We launched Energize Your Day last year, seeking to stimulate open debate on the most pressing contemporary issues facing Europe and by extension, the world. We hope that through reflection and exchange of different perspectives, we can enhance our understanding of common challenges and promote holistic, long-term thinking, leading to solutions and collaborative action. Previous editions have dealt with topics such as social movements and climate change, digital and democracy, an industrial strategy for Europe that delivers jobs, the Conference for Europe, and how to advance STEM education. Today, we will discuss the important topic of diversity in the workplace, why it matters, what companies and public authorities are doing to improve it, what we get right and do not, the role of legislation, the role of leadership and access to data, and whether the COVID-19 pandemic will produce setbacks or help us advance. We have a great panel to help shed light on how to unlock the powers that reside in diversity. I will present the panelists later. We are also honored to welcome Helena Dalli, the EU Commissioner for Equality, whose keynote speech we soon can look forward to. Now, Unity in Diversity reads the official motto of the European Union. The motto came about after a process involving European school classes, so it very much reflects the vision young people want for Europe. Europe youth tell us that both countries, public institutions, and we companies can draw strength from unlocking diversity. Now, data shows that we are not progressing fast. How can this be changed? Key to unlocking this force is equality. Improving equal opportunity pays amply. The European Institute for Gender Equality has estimated that improving gender equality alone could by 2050 increase the EU's GDP per capita by 6 to almost 10%, so 2 to 3 trillion euros. Commissioner Dalli, the prize to be won from diversity is significant. Diversity is about societies tapping into all its assets, talents, and potential. And you have been tasked to establish a union of diversity, inclusion, and equal chances. We are honored to have you with us today, and we very much look forward to your keynote address and to learn how the Commission plans to contribute to unlocking the benefits of diversity throughout the Union. The floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, good. Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me to speak on this important topic of diversity in the workplace. It is really an honor and a pleasure for me to join you. The European Union was built on the notion that strength and unity come from diversity. And it is this characteristic that most defines who we are. Despite our differences, we have come together as the EU to work for peace and prosperity while being enriched by the many cultures, traditions, and languages of the Union. My main goal as European Commissioner for Equality is to strengthen our commitment to inclusion and equality in all of its senses. The Commission has been promoting diversity and inclusion and combating discrimination through policy and legislative actions for a very long time. I am determined to continue implementing such actions to create more diverse, inclusive, and equal workplaces and societies. Because I strongly believe that diversity is an asset, a great force for Europe, which we have to cultivate and foster. Companies need to understand and meet the needs of diverse markets to compete and be successful in a global society. New ideas are born when we bring together a diverse group of people where everybody brings their perspective to the table. A workforce that represents the real diversity of society can help businesses to respond more effectively to the needs of potential clients, and it can boost the image and reputation of a company. Research also shows us that employers who properly implement diversity policies increase the well-being of the employees, reduce absenteeism, and ultimately increase the employees' commitment. This results in savings for the company. So diversity benefits everyone. But we have a very long way to go before we can truly say that our societies and workplaces are really diverse, inclusive, and equal for all. In March, we presented a new gender equality strategy for 2020-2025. One of the priorities is improving gender balance in corporate decision-making. Because despite past decades' progress on gender equality, there is still a lack of women in corporate decision-making positions. On average, only around 28% of board members of the largest publicly listed companies registered in the EU are women. And women only account for 8% of CEOs. This is a clear waste of human capital. Evidence shows that a broad range of talents and skills in the boardroom contributes to better decisions, better corporate governance, and public interest in business. It also drives economic growth. One major obstacle to achieve gender balance among board members is the lack of transparency in the selection process and qualification criteria. To address the problem in 2012, the Commission proposed rules to increase transparency in the selection of board members in the largest listed companies. The proposal does not impose binding quota obligations. Instead, it sets the target for member states to reach a quantitative objective of at least 40% representation for each sex among non-executive directors, or 33% for executive and non-executive directors. The method will be defined at the national level, provided that the selection of board positions follows transparent procedures. And as a person's merit will always be the main criterion for this selection. This proposal is supported by a majority of member states, but the Council has not yet reached a compromise to go ahead with adoption. This is a shame because evidence shows that gender targets or quotas work. The biggest improvements in European corporate boards have happened in countries that have taken legal measures. In others, the situation is static or is even getting worse. I am therefore trying to help unblock the deadlock in the Council. We are also promoting the exchange of good practices among companies and stakeholders, for example, in the framework of the diversity charters. And we are promoting a work environment that offers equal chances for women and men to progress in their careers. The economic and social consequences of the coronavirus pandemic show that equal opportunities and inclusive leadership matter more than ever. Closing the gender gaps in the workplace is an investment in the future of our union. Gender equality is an economic imperative and a competitive advantage. We need to tap into all our resources and talents to recover from this crisis. I therefore count on the corporate sector to ensure equal opportunities for women and men in their companies. Corporations should design and implement effective strategies to achieve better gender balance in top positions. I am also calling for more men in top corporate leadership to speak out in favor of inclusive and purpose-driven business models, because unlocking diversity in our workplace benefits us all, not only women. This leads me to emphasize that we must also address the underrepresentation of ethnic minorities at the workplace in the EU. As for greater gender diversity, Research also shows that companies having ethnic diversity in leadership experience higher return on equity, operating profit, and stock price. Over the years, the EU has developed laws that promote diversity and inclusion and combat all forms of discrimination in employment. Yet, it is clear that there are still high levels of racial and ethnic minority inequality in the labour market and in our whole society. To address these problems, I have just presented a new EU action plan on anti-racism. The action plan sets out a series of measures for the next 5 years to fight racism in Europe more effectively. The action plan calls for member states to adopt national action plans against racism and racial discrimination by the end of 2022. It also calls for more diversity of EU staff. The Commission will take steps to improve significantly the makeup of Commission staff through measures targeting recruitment and selection. By the end of the year, I will also present new strategies to improve LGBTI+ and Roma inclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, businesses are central to the world of work and are big drivers for change. Earlier this year, we celebrated 10 years of the EU Platform of Diversity Charters. The platform is a strong symbol of commitment to put diversity, inclusion and solidarity at the core of their activities. There are 24 national diversity charters across the EU. More than 12,000 signatories from the public and private sector, NGOs and trade unions, and over 16 million employees are represented. Concrete action of the platform includes exchange of good practices and joint publications to promote the business case of diversity. I have seen many great examples of measures that are making workplaces better for all, regardless of gender, ethnicity, religion, age, disability, and sexual orientation. During the pandemic, companies had to adapt quickly to a new situation, and they did. Many of the Diversity Charter signatories were able to show solidarity with their employees, their stakeholders, and society. They supported their employees and families by setting up remote working tools. Some organized information sessions on mental health or extended the health insurance coverage. I was impressed how others supported the community by donating money or products. Some changed their production lines to make face masks or disinfectants, or offered their services for free to people in need. It is crucial to tell these positive stories because of listening to one another and sharing best practices, we can learn how to do more ourselves. I will continue to support the diversity charters throughout my mandate with comprehensive policy on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. We need to turn diversity into a driver for growth for organizations, whether in the private or the public sector. To achieve this, we must raise awareness of the benefits that diversity can bring to businesses and how to manage diversity. I really believe that diversity can help us overcome the current social and economic challenges and to emerge as an even stronger and more inclusive society. As the first ever Commissioner for Equality, I will fight for a more equal workplace and for a society free from the stereotyping that stands in the way. Because until we can truthfully say that our workplaces are equal and reflect our society, where every member of staff feels accepted, the battle has to continue. I thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for these insightful remarks and impressive overview of the work of the Commission. Before you need to leave, allow me to ask two short questions. You have, for large parts of your career, worked to promote diversity and social justice. You might therefore be growing impatient and frustrated with the advancement our society is making promoting diversity and inclusion. Therefore, on the basis of what you have said and given us as overview today, what are the most important and urgent things you believe we need to address in the years ahead? And then second, in my company, we receive trainings on unconscious bias. This to lower the structural barriers to diversity and inclusion. Such bias exists in all organizations, in all human beings. How do you plan to address this in the European Commission?
Yes, as for your first remark, I am not one to give up. True, I had to adjust to the pace of working here in the Commission, but I am finding a Commission which is very receptive to my ideas. And for instance, the anti-racism action plan was not even in the work program. And we worked for it to become a reality. And we actually spent the summer working on an anti-racism action plan, which was not in the schedule. And we managed to launch it as well. So I really believe that when one is willing and one wants to really do something, and when you are convincing people that this is the right thing to do, you will do it. So we have these 5 strategies in 1 year. We shall have the disability strategy at the beginning of 2021. So really, these are all priorities because they all affect people's lives directly. They are all very important to me, and I will give it my all together with my staff and together with the rest of the Commission, which is very much on board with this work. In fact, we have a task force whereby equality work is mainstreamed throughout all the work of the Commission. So every commissioner who comes out with a policy proposal or with a legislative proposal has this person from the task force to look at that work from the equality perspective. So we are really working hard on mainstreaming equality throughout the Commission, and it is all areas of equality are very important to me, and most of all, they are all very close to my heart. With regards to unconscious bias, you are so right. That is a very, very big hurdle to overcome, because you and me, we all have these biases, and the problem is that we are not conscious about them, because when you are conscious about it, you make a conscious effort to improve, to change. But when you are unconscious to that bias, then you really need somebody to draw your attention, to raise awareness about it, and that is why also we're looking inwards towards the Commission. And this is what I remember telling the college, that charity begins at home. I cannot preach out there about an anti-racism action plan if we don't look inwards and see what is happening within the Commission and within the rest of the institutions. And so we are working with Commissioner Hahn with regards to HR to see how we can introduce ways and means so that the diversity of society is also reflected in the Commission.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. You've been gracious with your time with us today. You're the first ever Commissioner for Equality, a sign that Europe is serious about living up to its motto, unity is in diversity. Thank you again for joining this Energize Your Day debate. And I know we have many companies and citizens that are ready to support your efforts. Thank you. Now let us turn to our panel. We have asked our invited panelists to prepare some short statements on focus areas they see as important for action. After these, we will look forward to an informative debate. To you, the audience, please share your questions in the Q&A section of this web tool. Now, Katarina, Ivankovic-Knezevic, you have just heard from your political master, Commissioner Dalli, and as Director for Social Affairs of the Directorate General Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion of the European Commission, that's a mouthful, you are in charge of bringing many of the initiatives we heard about into life. We very much look forward to hearing your views on how the EU can support member states and businesses in unlocking the benefits of diversity. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, before we experienced some technical problems, so I'm happy that it's over now. Yes, you rightly pointed out, Commissioner Helena Dalli is our political master in the area of equality. And for me and for my directorate and our DG, this is particularly relevant when we speak about certain aspects of equality, like gender equality, and certain aspects of inclusion, and the whole aspect relevant for disability. And as Commissioner has pointed out, we are developing the new disability rights strategy, which is going to be, which is now in the process of finalization. We still have quite some number of consultations ongoing. Commissioner is really taking on board different views, different ideas, and it's always excellent to hear from many stakeholders what do they consider important and what is important in the field of disability, in order that we really reach a solid 10-year strategy to overcome all the difficulties that still persons with disabilities see in the society, and they see it in the labor market. And nevertheless, the evaluation of the still valid strategy has shown that concerns relevant to the labor market are one of the biggest concerns that persons with disability face all across the Europe, and this is something that we need to pay close attention to. But let me give you maybe a bit broader picture when it comes to diversity and inclusion in the world of work or in the labor markets all around the Europe. I would like to highlight that for us in the EMPL policy sphere, so the social policy in the most broadest sense, meaning employment, social inclusion, and skills, we have, fortunately, we have a good guidance tool, and it is our European Pillar of Social Rights, which was proclaimed in 2017 by European Commission, European Parliament, and the member states, meaning all of us have committed to implement the pillar within our policies. And now we are in a process of consultation of the future action plan on the implementation of the pillar. The action plan was something that many of European, either members of the parliament or advocates or politicians were calling upon to have a plan how to implement 20 values and who is going to do what. We are going to present the action plan on the pillar. Next year, it is going to be in a social summit, in the next social summit under the Portuguese presidency. And we want to have in the action plan clear deliverables that will have to be done at the EU level to tackle all 20 principles. Many of those principles are very relevant for the topic that we are discussing today, because some of them explicitly mention gender equality or equal opportunities, like Pillar Principle 3, and some of them tackle different aspects, like the ones that Commissioner pointed out as the gender equality or the position of women in the labor market. We've seen that the COVID crisis has really worsened the position of women in the labor market in, I would dare to say, all the member states. We've seen that home office was indeed quite challenging, well, for both genders, but for women in particular, and especially those who were having school, home school offices as well at the same time as the home office from the regular business. And also this is important to highlight in the light of one of the directive that is the direct outcome of the pillar, and it is the work-life balance directive. It was adopted in August 2019, and this directive brings some new elements in the work-life balance sphere. Not only the parental leave, different changes within the parental leave, but also it introduces the father's leave for the first time. We have the stipulation in one of the EU directives, and also carers leave and flexible working arrangements. So now it is up to the member states, of course, to transpose the directive into their legal systems, and we really are willing to help in any way we can. I would only like to highlight a bit, and I'm trying to pay attention to the time, that some of the groups still have difficulties within the labor market in the light of diversity. We spoke a bit about, Commissioner mentioned the migrants, and indeed migrants workers are, they play an extremely important role in our societies, and they make mostly European so-called frontline workers. And they really played a key role during the COVID pandemic in ensuring really that the business continuity on essential services such as healthcare, food supply, or transportation. And this is important that we undertake all the actions relevant for their inclusion and full inclusion in the labor markets, and also to secure additional support in the light of upskilling and reskilling, all in line with our new skills agenda, which was launched in July 2020. Also, I would like to mention the persons with disabilities. Not only that we are developing the new strategy, but we have to pay close attention to the directive that was already agreed in 2000. It's called the Employment Equality Directives, which really prohibits any discrimination, either in the process of employment or in the labor market, and ensures that all of the workers and all of the people have equal treatment in the workplace. So this is something that is extremely important and relevant still today. 20 years ago, I would dare to say that those who were working on the directive were quite brave and put really some solid base that even after 20 years, all of those stipulations are still relevant, and we still have a long way to go in order to reach the full equality when it comes to the labor market. This year and last year, we have undertaken a big campaign, the awareness raising campaign on the directive from 2000, with an access on combating any form of discrimination while being employed, and also promoting the reasonable accommodation of persons with disabilities. And reasonable accommodation is something that we see as an obstacle for the persons with disabilities to enter the labor market, or an obstacle with plenty of difficulties while being employed, where the workplace needs to be really adapted for the need of persons with disabilities. And also we see huge potential, as still the percentage of and the activity rate of persons with disability is much lower than of persons without disability, and knowing from the stakeholders the willingness of persons with disabilities to engage in the labor market is much higher than what is really happening in the reality. And this is one of the areas where we would need to do additional push, and where we would need to work more in the light of the future disability strategy. I would stop here, and then we can continue during the discussion.
Thanks a lot, Katarina, and thanks for focusing on the labor market as well. It is a nice way of moving to Evelyn Regner, who has joined us from the European Parliament, Social Democrat, a member of European Parliament and chair of the Women's Right and Gender Equality Committee. You are a lawmaker and you have listened to the commissioner and the commissioner representative. I'm tempted to ask, do we need more laws than strategies to make headway on diversity and inclusion? And I hope we now have you also on sound. So if not, we will have to be inventive. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. No. Okay. Then let's the technical staff operate try to work that one out, and then I'm keen to bring in, because Katarina mentioned also or focused also on the importance of integrating people with disabilities. And Ana Luisa, you're a Latin American human rights activist, an advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities, and president of the International Disability Alliance. The opposite of inclusion is exclusion. Persons with disabilities face more exclusions than persons without. Also, among persons with disability, data show inequalities. You join us today from Ecuador and can offer global perspectives on diversity and inclusion. In your view, what can governments and business do to improve inclusion for persons with disabilities?
Good morning, and from Latin America, from Ecuador. I am really pleased to participate at this conference, even though we have this different time zone, and it will be good afternoon for all your excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. And I am happy to also deliver on behalf of the International Disability Alliance, IDA, of which I am president. So please, first, let me introduce you to IDA. IDA is an alliance of 8 global and 6 regional networks of organizations of persons with disabilities. One of those regional networks is a member organization, the European Disability Forum, EDF. And we advocate united for the rights of the 1 billion persons with disabilities worldwide, making visible the motto of the disability rights movement, nothing about us without us. Through 1,100 organizations of persons with disabilities and their families in more than 180 countries, those organizations whom we represent. And it is now almost 14 years since the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD, was adopted, and 5 since the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development was adopted, with Goal 8 focusing on full and productive employment and decent work for all. And it is a good time to review first the successes we have achieved and the gaps in terms of fulfilling that SDG 8 in line with Article 27 of the CRPD, that is speaking us about quality inclusive employment for persons with disabilities. And IDA's experience in working on inclusive employment particularly shows that there is an urgent need to clarify between inclusive employment and CRPD compliant inclusive employment. While inclusive employment focuses on getting people with disabilities into jobs, CRPD compliant inclusive employment would require us to take a more holistic approach to transform labor markets, leading to the removal of barriers to employment and fundamentally shifting the way that businesses conduct recruitment, support their employees, and create inclusive environments for all people with disabilities. In particular, a CRPD compliant approach to inclusive employment should aim to combat discrimination across all elements of employment. So it is important for us that employment for persons with disabilities should be ensured that this will not happen in isolation. We use to also bring this urgent call to governments to recall that it is intrinsically linked to education, the main pillar of inclusive development, also linked with accessibility and availability of laws and policies that protect the right of persons with disabilities to access opportunities on an equal basis with others. And I am referring to women with disabilities, migrants with disabilities, indigenous persons with disabilities, among others, and persons with disabilities from other represented groups, such as deafblind persons, persons with intellectual disabilities, and persons with psychosocial disabilities. Somehow, inclusive employment has been focused only in certain constituencies or groups within the disability movement, but we are speaking and we are making this call for inclusive employment for all persons with disabilities. And I must recall that because we are living in unprecedented times where COVID-19 has caused an upheaval in our lives, on one hand, persons with disabilities are now even more likely to be the first ones to lose jobs and the last to be recruited post-pandemic. And on the other hand, the pandemic has shown that working from home, use of technologies, understanding of and provision of reasonable accommodation, as Katarina also mentioned and highlighted, that is a must in the workplace to be ensured for disability inclusion at the workplace. Achieving their goals in inclusive employment, in being able to adjust in this new world that we are living, but especially for us, is the urgent need to realize the right to decent work for all and create truly diverse workplace, ending poverty by this means worldwide. Thank you, Olav.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Anna Lucia. I think we still have some problems to hear Evelyn, or am I wrong? We still can't hear you. But then let us play by ear. We have Tania Garrett from Adobe. She is Vice President, International Employee Experience for the EMEA region, looking at all the awards Adobe has gotten over the last couple of years for diversity, inclusion, leadership, and best place to work. I'm wondering, are you working in diversity heaven? Your company's track record shows you are getting things right. So please tell us about what actions you believe to be important to successfully tap into the benefits of diversity and inclusion. And then hopefully when you have done your remarks, we will be able to hear Evelyn also in due course. Tania, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So am I living in diversity heaven? I'm not sure just yet, but we definitely, as an organisation, have made, I think, significant progress over the last few years, for sure. I would say, my role, I look after our international region, which covers the European region, Asia Pacific, and also Japan. And I think historically we've probably trended slightly behind in terms of where the US has been in terms of their efforts. But I think, overall what's really interesting, and I think, where we have made significant progress is that we're not just relying on all the wonderful things that the other guest speakers have spoken about. We're not just reliant on laws or rules and regulations to make us a diverse organisation. It's something very organic for us, and it's something that we spend a lot of time on. It's something that we constantly iterate and we constantly change our approach to make sure that what we're doing is right. And I think for any company to be successful in the space of diversity and inclusion, it has to be something the company is genuinely committed to. And I think some of the mistakes that companies make are very much around either relying on legislation to legislate how the company behaves, and or relying on it being a human resources program. It can't just be a human resources program. It has to be something that the very top leadership of the organization is bought into, is supportive of, and will resource and fund and drive. And it's also something that the employee base of the organization has to get behind. And there has to be a sort of self-fulfilling motion in terms of diversity and inclusion. And I think from Adobe's perspective, what we've done well is that we have a combination in terms of our strategy. So we have 4 pillars to our strategy for diversity and inclusion. And the first one is that we believe in building the talent pipeline, which talks about the kind of communities where we work and where we operate, and what are we doing as an organization to help build the future talent for technology going forward. So how are we investing in students? How are we investing in internships? And making sure that we give priority to diverse candidates for those roles and for those experiences. And then also participating in events which give diverse students, children, teenagers, just the understanding of the opportunities that exist within technology. And the other thing that we do is we focus very heavily on how we attract candidates to Adobe. And one of the things that you referenced earlier in terms of unconscious bias, we do tons of training for our managers, for our hiring managers, in terms of unconscious bias, and making sure that, to the extent that we can, that we eliminate bias in our hiring practices. And whether that's through how we approach the market in terms of looking for candidates, how we partner with search firms or agencies, making sure they understand what our thoughts are on diversity and what we want to achieve. But it's also making sure that our processes are completely transparent and that they're open in terms of making sure that all candidates are good candidates for Adobe. The other couple of things that we focus on is parity. We take parity very, very seriously, and it goes without saying that we meet our obligations in terms of statutory reporting around gender pay, but as a company, we've gone beyond that. So we have decided that we want pay parity for everybody in the organisation. It's probably a more deep-rooted and a much more detailed view in terms of what we consider pay parity. So we look at every person in their jobs, and we make sure that from a pay perspective that we're being fair and equitable in terms of how we treat people. And that applies to whether it's females, whether it's males, whether it's underrepresented minorities. We look at it from the standpoint of everybody should be paid equally for the role that they're doing. And we renew that on an annual basis to make sure that we're constantly have pay parity across the organisation. The other thing that we've implemented more recently is opportunity parity, where we are making conscious strides to make sure that any internal roles or moves or promotion are open to everybody. So we constantly review our promotion processes, our promotion metrics, to make sure that we are balanced in terms of who is being promoted. And lastly, and I think potentially the most important thing, is that we really focus on enhancing what we call employee experience. My job title says employee experience. It's really, what was originally known as human resources. But what we do is, diversity is nothing without inclusion. And we truly believe that. We believe that if we hire diverse candidates, whether they're female, ethnic minorities, disabled individuals, that the only way that they can be successful is if they arrive into an organisation where they can thrive, where they can bring their whole selves to work and be proud of who they are, and know that they are not going to be marginalised, or they're not going to be able to be effective. So we have a very organic approach, which is employee-led. So we've created lots of networks within our organisation, and they are led by people who want to be engaged with the inclusion activities that we drive. So we have a Black employee network, we have a Hispanic employee network, we have an LGBTQ network, and a veteran network, and an access network, which is for our disabled staff. And the people are engaged with those networks, and they tell us what we need to do differently as an organization and what we can do better as an organization to make them feel that they can bring their whole selves to work. And I think the importance there is this is coming from our employee base, because they feel safe, they feel like they can be engaged, and they know that the company will support them and listen to them, which is incredibly important. Because if we hire diverse candidates and as I said, they arrive into an organization where they can't be successful, then Adobe won't be successful. So we have to create that environment for them.
Thank you, Tania. And this should motivate a lot of us in business, and also European institutions broadly, but also others that listen in today greatly, I feel. Now I learn at least that we can hear Evelyn, and thanks for bearing with us on the technology side. As I said, we are fortunate to have you with us this afternoon. You're a Social Democrat member of the European Parliament. You're chair of the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee. You're a lawmaker, and you have listened to the Commissioner and the Commission representatives, Katarina, talking about flagship initiatives, talking about strategies. Well, you know, as I said earlier, I'm tempted to ask whether we need more laws than these strategies and flagship initiatives to make headway on diversity and inclusion. A bit more that bites, perhaps. What's your view?
Can hear me? An excellent
Now
good
we can hear
afternoon.
you.
Can you hear me? Wow. So I'm so sorry for those technical problems. I had the pleasure already to listen to all those other great examples and presentations. So thank you that finally I have the opportunity to share a couple of thoughts with you. So diversity at workplace. I mean, I think we don't have to talk about the benefits. We all know that enterprises are more successful, they earn better money, and they make the employees happier. So the employees turnover is not so big. There is more engagement, high motivation, creativity. So we all know that, but how to come there? We need both. Bottom up and top down. So what I could listen right now, those excellent examples, whether it's the huge commitments and really the activities of enterprises, of course, is fantastic. But we should be also realistic and see that there are many enterprises who are not doing so fantastically with voluntary measures. So what we need is both a strategy and, of course, also regulation. I'll give you this one example where we are already fighting for years. Half of the population, that's women. And when you just look at structures and when you look at diversity at the workplace, especially when dealing with positions in power, we see, I mean, it's not representative at all. It's also about power. It's about existing structures that existed for centuries since mankind is existing. So we have to catch up also with legislative measures, with regulation, in order to motivate all those companies who are not so active when it's about voluntary measures going top down. I know fantastic examples, and I really liked it very much right now to listen to all those good examples. When you just look at reality, you see we need another 107 years in order to catch up with the proper diversity, just when we're talking of women and men at workplace in those career positions. And the same, of course, with other areas when we talk about age discrimination, when we talk about ethnic minorities. We all know these benefits, not only for the society, when a company is taken on board a better diversity, but we see we really need the push of the legislators. And just in the last years, in several countries, there were also pushbacks. So we need this legislation. What means the legislation? I'm referring to the women on boards, the gender balance on boards directive that finally really should be decided by the council. But of course, it's far more. It's all these opening of biases that are still existing. So the horizontal directive, we have the European Union's level, looking at the discrimination that exists with the ethnic backgrounds, concerning age, concerning the LGBTI community. So somehow the whole field, of course, also people having physical or other handicaps at work. So what we need is some more legislation that is applied. What has to be done is to do that, as I said, bottom up and top down. And above all, it means respect of democracy at work, the inclusion of trade unions, the inclusion of those representing the workforce, because they themselves, of course, know the best where there are the problems. So this was a little bit lacking so far, where I would like to see more done also at the legislative side, that information, consultation, participation of the workforce, the respect for all those representing workers, being female, male, being elderly, being younger, being whatever, should be taken on board. So when I just would like to sum up right now, what we are really waiting eagerly is that this directive that is already pending for so many years, so the draft was presented by the Commission 2012, that the women and men representing the boards should be really come into existence. And of course, some other measures as well we should take on board. But I would like to would like to stop right now here, because I think we should also have a little bit room of exchange and debate.
Thanks, Evelyn, and thanks for raising the issue of targets and quotas. We have that in many policy areas in the European Union, and not least the climate area. Katarina, if I may ask you, the commissioner said that she was going to make herself strong for deblocking the dossiers that are now in the council. One, what can be done to deblock them, but also why has the European Union been shy on proposing targets and quotas in this area? Do you have a view on that?
Well, I think we are entering, and I'm sure Evelyn knows it much better from the first hand, into the difficult discussion on the position of the different member states over different files. And we know more or less who is going to block, if I can be dishonest, and who is going to support certain files and certain proposals. And we know that women on board has been hanging in the air for quite a long time. We have seen throughout the member states some good examples how this issue have been solved, or how they tried to solve it, like the German example, for just to point one. But we also see that there is no unanimity when it comes to these questions. I think the question on quota is almost like an internal question, where we have as many political, let's say, groups, as many opinions and thoughts, and even if the biggest one could find a common ground, there would be always somebody who might not feel very confident, or who might not believe that this is the best way forward. I can tell you that from the disability angle on which I work, we see that the system is working quite well. Quota system is working quite well in many member states that have it, that have introduced it. Either they have put the system that in certain cases, if you for example, have more than 20 employees, then you have at least one person with disability, or if you have more, the percentage have to be there. Those member states that also have some kind of penalty system. So if you don't fulfill the quota, then you either have to pay a financial fee that goes into separate fund, or you can use it to support, let's say, the educational aspects of persons with disabilities, etc. And it is working quite well. But what is problematic in reality, in the real life, is that we unfortunately still do have those who are more willing to pay the fine than to employ and than to put this additional effort into really trying to secure the reasonable accommodation and to get the persons with disabilities on board. And we have seen within our campaign for that lasted for almost a year and a half, that you have such excellent employers, and you have those that could be shown not only EU-wide but worldwide, but then yet still you have those who really think that the only reasonable accommodation aspect that you have to respect is that you broaden the toilet doors, or that you have a different table or different chairs. So this is something where I see we still have to do lots of awareness raising. I think the same goes for any other quota, not to mention the political quota for the parliaments, and we are not entering into that discussion. But I think in the light of the good cooperation, in the light of open method of coordination that we all signed for, all of the member states as well, there is still plenty of work, and I'm pretty positive that, and I hope that during the mandate of the present Commission we will be able to solve some of the issues. But that would have to mean that we have more or less all of them on board, and I'm sure my colleagues could debate about it for hours.
Yeah, no, and we can't debate every point for hours, but one of the points that came out, I think also what Tania alluded to in her remarks, is one that in Adobe it looks like they have control of the data. They measure diversity. They will have to, because they're looking at parities and equality. And you, Anna Luisa, you also mentioned that at the global level we don't really have data that showcases the way people with disability are actually faring in the world. That begs the question, really: are we flying blind? Some companies have a lot of data to prove and progress and measure advancements. Some countries have no data, and European institutions might be somewhere in the middle, having a bit of data, perhaps not enough. What is the role of data for us in this field going forward? Let's start with Anna Lucia, and then move to Tania to discuss the issue about availability of data and the importance of measuring diversity and inclusion.
Well, we usually hear that what we do not inform, what is not available there as data, may not exist. So generally, data about persons with disabilities is showing that persons with disabilities face significant exclusion from the formal labor market and are more likely to be in the informal sector. And this is true even in the EU, where evidence suggests that across the EU, persons with disabilities are far less likely to be employed than persons without disabilities. Even though data on disability is often either not there, or when available, sometimes is not reliable or comparable, or cannot be disaggregated. To make decisions, and especially for governments to be able to really secure that public budgets are really inclusive for persons with disabilities, and the funding is there to ensure disability inclusion. However, I must just share very quickly some figures disseminated by the UN at their flagship report on disability that will give us also an idea of how persons with disabilities are really not represented in the workforce, even though Europe is, of course, leading great efforts on the quality inclusive employment. And also we have heard, and I take the opportunity also to congratulate Europe because of this disability inclusion strategy. And so please let me refer to how these lower rates of employment have been persistently observed for persons with disabilities across 8 geographical regions. The employment to population ratio, this is called EPR, for persons with disabilities aged 15 years and older is 36% on average, whereas this EPR for persons without disabilities is 60%. I may give you an example about Northern Africa and Western Asia. This EPR is about 25%. In Central and Southern Asia is 28%. If in Sub-Saharan Africa, it is about 34%, and in Latin America and the Caribbean, 31%. Europe is leading with this 44%. So it is for us important that we really share figures, share data, show how this inclusive employment is really ensuring this higher quality of life of persons with disabilities, and how we are really putting an eye on really ending poverty.
Thank you, Tania. Anna Luisa. Tania, data in your organization, does it play an important role for driving your actions?
Yeah, very much so. And I think, I would say we're not perfect in this area, largely because, we're not always able to collect the data, whether that's, constraints, legislative constraints, or, just people not willing to share that information. So, I think it's true for a lot of companies insofar as, gender data is one of the easiest to collect, and therefore, I think a lot of focus on interventions, programs, etc., for females or for gender-related subjects is far easier than perhaps for ethnic minorities or disabled individuals. So I think companies and legislation maybe needs to improve in terms of data collection, because I think without good data and without understanding your own population and being able then to have targeted interventions is made much harder. So I think there are inconsistencies certainly between our ability to collect data and our desire to make improvements, and I think all companies certainly face that. That's not just an Adobe subject at all, and I think particularly in Europe it's incredibly hard to have a high degree of confidence that your data is accurate and is truly reflective of your workforce. And I think I think collectively we have to do better at being able to gather data and use data in order to continue to make improvements.
Thanks. I think that sounded a bit like homework for the Commission, Katarina. I mean, this event series is all about actions and trying to get more done. Evelyn, when you heard Lucia now talking about EU being in the lead in many respects on diversity and inclusion, and also in actually getting people with disabilities into employment, the figure or the data we heard, it's not enough, but it compares to other regions of the world favorably. But isn't there a role for Europe not only to show the rest of the world what can be done, but also to seek to support other parts of the world in their work to actually get more diversity and inclusion happening in their countries and in their parts of the world? How do you see the international cooperation element of progressing diversity and inclusion today?
Definitely. I mean, you're just raising that. Many of those companies, European companies, and European companies being a global player and being globally successful, of course, also have a responsibility to take diversity issues in all fields as a responsibility, not only within the European Union's countries, but everywhere. You were just referring to data. Here, I just thought to mention what the European Parliament was already asking for years and has to be implemented, and we're working on that, on non-financial reporting. When we are talking about non-financial reporting, there are so many data and figures on board that could be a good basis, not only for the shareholders to look what the European company is doing within Europe, the European Union, but also outside, where there are clients, where there are consumers, where there is the workforce as well. And with this data we get on human resources, including diversity criteria, of course, we can also develop strategies that have to be implemented by those enterprises concerning all those other countries as well. Therefore, my answer to your question is yes, there is a responsibility. Yes, it's far more than giving a good example. It's just also thinking of all those people who are consumers, employees, and so on worldwide, and the whole system of non-financial reporting that gives us a better basis, better data that are comparable, should be developed far further.
Thank you, Evelyn. And mindful of time, I have been alerted to the fact that we are approaching the end of this this panel debate. Allow me to thank you all for taking part and sharing your views. I'm amazed of what we have managed to cover so many complex dimensions of diversity and inclusion in such a short time. We have heard it underlined again in the debate that promoting diversity and inclusion, we gain strength. This as a European Union, as institutions and as companies. We have heard it stressed that to foster diversity and inclusion is a leadership responsibility. Leaders need to drive the commitment to diversity in their organizations. And our leaders need to be held accountable for driving improvements in this area. Finally, we have learned that it is also a personal responsibility to be aware of our unconscious bias. These form strong structural barriers to accepting others, accepting new ideas, and accepting change and to take action. Thank you all for being with this afternoon, and I hope this Energize Your Day event has provided insights and food for thought, and most of all, that it can spur for action on diversity and inclusion. We will be back with more events in this series later this fall, and until then, stay safe and healthy, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.